Dimnik she doing to kasaniha.
I often say that I play the most immersive PC games in the world. Most of the games that I play are conflicts. They are stories from the past about great battles and great men who fought in them. It's a capable digital platform, these immersive games, and for that reason, and based on the success of some recent videos and some requests from viewers of those videos, I've chosen now to, from time to time, share with you stories from the same settings of these immersive games that we play. 10 million soldiers lost their lives in World War I. 7 million civilians were also killed. It's known as the Great War, and indeed, it is one of the most regrettable and disgusting conflicts in the history of the human experience. During World War I, we saw the advent of modern technology that enabled destruction on a level never seen before in conflict, namely the introduction of machine guns, chemical weapons, and armored vehicles. We also saw the advent of a new kind of war, trench warfare, where armies unable to advance in the face of the destruction of these new technologies instead elected to align themselves across a long frontage, dig into these trenches, these defensive fighting positions, and fight a war of attrition that would claim the lives of millions. The devastation that was witnessed in the trenches of World War I battlefields was aptly captured in the literary genius of a generation of poets who fought in those very trenches. Among these poets are names that you might recognize, and certainly some poems that you've likely heard before. Names like Siegfried Sassoon, Rupert Brooke, Isaac Rosenberg, and Robert Graves. Perhaps the only thing more haunting than the words written by the poets of World War I are the dates that their lives ended. Rupert Brooke, 1915. Isaac Rosenberg, 1918. Edward Thomas, 1917. John McCrae, 1918. Charles Sorley, 1915. These are men who recorded their experiences in writing only to later pay the ultimate cost for the cause that they were fighting for. Wilfred Owen was born on March 18th, 1893, in Shropshire, England. After the death of his grandfather in 1897, his family moved to a place called Birkenhead, where he was educated at the Birkenhead Institute. He moved again later on and studied at a technical school called Shrewsbury, and actually became interested in the arts at a really young age and began writing poetry as early as his teenage years. By 1911, he had matriculated at the University of London and began teaching at an English school in France in 1913. He returned back to Britain from France in 1915 as the war was beginning to kick off, and he enlisted in the Artists' Rifles, which was a reserve unit in the British military. He trained in England for some time and was ultimately commissioned as a second lieutenant in the Manchester Regiment in 1916. He deployed to the front and was wounded in combat in 1917. At that same time, he was diagnosed with shell shock and evacuated to the war hospital near Edinburgh. While he was convalescing at the Edinburgh War Hospital, he met another famous poet of the World War I generation, that is, Siegfried Sassoon. It was Siegfried Sassoon who learned that Wilfred Owen was a poet by trade and encouraged him to begin writing. Owen would ultimately publish 5 poems from his time in the military serving during World War I. Several of them he wrote while he was convalescing at Edinburgh. 2 of them are the Anthem for Doomed Youth and, importantly, the one that we're here to talk about today, Dulce et Decorum Est. Dulce et Decorum Est is my favorite poem from the generation of World War I poets. It's important to me personally because it paints a treacherous but vivid image of life at the front lines. It describes a scene where a unit had been fighting for some time in the trenches at the front, and they were finally going to rest in the rear echelon. So they turned their back on the enemy and began to move away. But it's as they moved away from the front that they were in the most danger. They faced a gas attack, and the gas shells landed amidst the men as they were trying to get to this place where they could be at rest, and they became overcome, fumbling with their equipment, trying to don their masks, and one man failed to don his mask in time. Owen describes the fate of this one soldier, and ultimately asks the reader the hard question: Dulce et decorum est, pro patria mori, which is Latin for, "Oh, how sweet and becoming it is to die for one's country." Yes, as Owen convalesced in Edinburgh, his thoughts were on the war itself. He was no longer disillusioned with the grandeur of glory and instead questioned how sweet and becoming it was to die for one's country. And clearly he thought that that was not the case. Owen rejoined his regiment in June of 1918. In August, he returned to France. In October, he was awarded the Military Cross for bravery. And on November 4th, 1918, he was killed in action. He was 25 years old. News of his death reached his parents on November 11th, Armistice Day. His poem, Dulce et decorum est, was published on December 29th, 1920. And it is my privilege to share it with you now. Thanks so much for hanging out for today's video. I'm interested in feedback on this sort of content, so let me know in the comments below if you'd like to hear more of it. If you look to support the channel in a more significant way, I invite you to do that by becoming a member for as little as 99 cents a month. You can find out more information by clicking the blue join button that is in the bottom right of this video box. I am Controlled Pairs, and I play the most immersive PC games in the world. This is Beyond the Wire. Now see you in the next one.